child.
Oh, yeah. I can see that. Yeah.
And you did too, right? She had.
We have it. Yes, Saturday.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you, yes, I'm so glad it's over. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that baby's here.
Boy or girl?
Little boy.
Aw.
Yeah, 7 pounds, 5 ounces.
Are they with you?
Yes,
They live with you?
yes, so I get to enjoy him. Yeah, it's nice.
All right. You wanna sit, meditate
Yeah. They need it.
first? Need it?
They need it.
Mhm.
All right. So I'll go through the posture first, spine straight. And draw the low belly in just very gently. Shoulders relaxed. Feet flat on the floor. A chair. Hands a little closer to your torso, maybe in your lap or on your thighs, just so you get the biceps in line with the torso. Chin slightly tucked. Lips are closed, teeth are slightly separate. Tongue resting against the upper top teeth. Eyes are closed. So just the first part, still the body. And slowly bring your awareness to your breath. And start to lengthen your exhales. And tie your mind to the breath every time it wanders away, gently bring it back. So let's go through the preliminaries. So we'll start with first one. It's going for refuge. And so bring the mind your best understanding of karma of emptiness. 3 objects of refuge are the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. So taking refuge in the Buddha in the sense that I have equal potential to become a Buddha as a Buddha. I have equal possibility to become a Buddha because I'm not hardwired suffering. A Buddha is also empty of being self-existent. The same way we are empty of being self-existently suffering beings. So if I change the seeds in my mind, I can become a being like that. So take refuge in that understanding that you're not fixed this way in your condition, and you're infinitely perfectible. Things are coming from seeds, treating others. The Dharma, and taking refuge in one sense in the teachings. Actual Dharma teachings. And then the deepest sense is understanding that things are coming from you and not at you. And if I change my karma, I change the world for me. And nothing is impossible if things are coming from seeds. And then Sangha are the beings that have perceived that truth directly. Aryas have the direct perception of emptiness. And taking refuge in those beings because they are truly of help. Because they've seen the nature of our condition and truly understand that it's changeable. They've seen directly that things are coming from causes. And then the thing is, you don't know who these beings are. They could be all around you. You can't prove that they're that way or not that way. So maybe having some openness to the people around you. Maybe they are realized people just helping guiding me. People in my family, my life. Maybe they're Buddhas. And then generating bodhicitta, so bring to mind the wish to want to stop suffering for yourself so that you can help all other beings. But really try to develop a disgust for this type of suffering life that we're constantly stuck in, the ups and downs of our everyday life, stresses, anxieties, the physical sicknesses. Ultimately, the fact that this life ends in death and the desire to want to stop that. And to help the people you love that are suffering from the same thing. So here, just good to think about the people maybe closest to you, and just get an idea of like their sufferings that they deal with on a daily basis. And then just develop a wish in your heart to want to be able to help them. And then so bring to mind a holy being for you. So the Buddha, Jesus, Dalai Lama, but somebody who represents some ideal that you would like to aspire to yourself. And just have them come sit in front of you here. A friend, a teacher, or a parent, but just somebody that directs you towards becoming a kinder, nicer person, wiser. So start to color them in front of you. Start with their silhouette. And then start to paint in their features. See them as a live, breathing person in front of you, not a picture. Smiling, happy to be here. And then make them an offering. So highest offering being your practice, your commitment to do a practice every day, meditation or study or Tai Chi, whatever it might be. But ultimately, these kind of beings just want to see you stop your suffering. Bring to mind the things that you see in them as being high qualities. And just make mental prostration to them. Like just by acknowledging them mainly. And thinking how cool it is to have qualities like that. And then last two, so purification, bring to mind some negative deed that you did in the past day. And 4 parts. First part is try to develop a little regret for having done that. I'm sorry, recognize the first part. Recognize that you actually did something that was probably not the best way to act if things are coming from causes, and that puts imprints into my mind stream, which will create a future result for myself. Then the recognition that recognize that that's probably wasn't a good thing to do. And then 2 is develop a little regret for it. Like you just drank a glass of water or a glass of poison that you thought was water. And then make a plan with yourself not to do that again for a certain period of time. So restraint. And make it a length of time that you can actually stick to. And then a resolution. So think of something you can do to counter counter that negative seed that you put into your mind. So make a plan. And finally, rejoice. So think of something kind you did for somebody else in the past day or so. And just replay it. Feel good about it. Understand that you put an imprint in your mind by seeing yourself do that thing, which will produce a desirable result for yourself in the future. And then come back to the breath. Take a few breaths. And then we'll just do a little mini meditation on good karmic seeds that we're planting. So think about this morning and think about all the things you did today in the morning for somebody else that influenced somebody else. So all the kind things. And just find the biggest one that you did this morning. It doesn't have to be huge acts, but just whatever your day, whatever your morning had. And then move to the afternoon. What was the kindest thing you did for somebody this afternoon? So just go through the list. Again, no matter how small. And then go to this evening. And maybe just coming here is the kindest thing done for somebody this evening, which is a big thing. But if there's something else that trumps that, then bring that to mind. And then go back to your morning one. And second law of karma is that karma grows. So imagine you put a tiny little seed in your mind this morning by that act. And just imagine in the next month, few months, that seed being taken care of, fertilized, watered every day, given the ultimate causes to ripen as big and as grand as it could be. See what a result of that karma would be. What's that little seed going to turn into? And be big in your imagination. The bigger the better. So first start with yourself. You know what? Then I'll bring back to yourself. And then expand it to the world. One of the results of karma is that you'll experience an environmental result. The world around you will change. So how will that seed that you planted this morning change your world in the future, the world that you perceive? And then go to the afternoon. And grow that seed in your mind. See the result that it will bring for you. Think big. And then see for your world. It's the environmental result of that karma. Nurtured and taken care of. Grown big. And then and so come to this evening. And let's just assume that coming here is the best thing you can do for somebody. Is to work on fixing yourself. And so just imagine the result this will create in your mind. Become much more wiser, big time free of suffering. A mind completely at peace, happy. No longer able to have any mental afflictions. And then for your environment, your world, imagine a world completely at peace, completely understands that the way to be happy is to take care of somebody else. And just picture a world like that, a perfect world. Everyone taking care of one another. And then come back to your breath. Take 3 long breaths. After your third, come out. Open the eyes. Stretch. Okay.
Thanks.
Is she all right?
You just cough.
Is she there?
She'll be okay.
Is she there? Where is she? Did she leave?
So that-
Oh.
She brought her water.
Oh.
Sometimes you just cough and you have to. We can all do CPR, right? Did you have to take it at the one?
Do I remember? I think so.
Staying alive, staying
Yeah, I know
alive.
that much. That's all you need to know now, right? There's no
Right.
really breath part.
No more breaths.
Let's see if she's already.
Oh, there we go. Well, hold on. It's my- Yeah,
She must be in the bathroom.
she may have gone to her car because I think I heard her.
Oh. The door's closed, but I had a pen I could have gave her. Yeah. Alrighty. Remember this stuff?
Silly putty.
Silly putty.
Yes.
I
I
seen it
lost mine. I used to sit and.
play with it for hours.
Yes.
You know, the newspapers on, like they were.
No, you can't really.
I tried, yeah, it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the
At
reason,
work yesterday, we got all these things for kids that have ADHD. I'll bring us one thing and it's cool. It's a little marble that's in a, it's like in a little netting and you just kind of fidget with it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
to fidget without
Yeah.
distracting
Yeah, yeah.
anybody. It's really cool.
nice. Well, the reason I bought this because the mind is like silly putty, right? So like everything you think, this is like in Tibetan, this is how they define a karmic seed.
Huh.
It's like when you're aware of yourself doing something, that awareness presses up against the mind and leaves like an imprint in the mind, just like silly putty.
Mm.
So I always hear this example being used of silly putty, but
Oh, that's cool.
yeah. So you all right, Beth?
You're ready to start.
Yeah, they're all right.
I thought you went to your car with a pen.
No, sometimes if I hold the cough in, I go into like these little weird spasms.
Oh,
Yeah, sometimes it's worse to hold it. Just
Yeah.
goes on.
Sure, if you're quiet, I'm not cough.
So you remember this? I'm just talking about this. Silly putty.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. We used to put it on cones.
Yeah, yeah.
that's what I just said, but it came to the thing doesn't work.
But, and how the mind works, it's said that the mind is like silly putty. So everything you think there do, it puts an imprint into the mind like that.
That's good.
And it leaves like an imprint, whatever you expose your mind to, your mind becomes. So everything that you're aware of, it's become super, super important in that sense. I don't know, it's just cool that I
No,
found it.
in Tai Chi Chuan, we do pulling taffy. We use, pull it to.
Yeah. So you have to get some silly putty. You want to use this?
No, we haven't. I haven't.
Oh, you have it?
I haven't. Have bigger ones, bigger ones.
Only you can't eat this.
But that's great.
So let's just finish up this course. This should be the last of it tonight. And we can be done.
Forever. Forever.
Oh, forever.
Forever.
Ah,
Forever.
and you were all here for like the last time we went through the class, right? 2 weeks ago?
Mhm.
I think so.
Are they okay? The two people?
I don't know. I haven't heard from them. I just heard, all I heard was from Allison today. She said she's been having headaches. Is that not working? All right, so let's just quickly go through this to catch back up, because this was the hard stuff. So the big thing in trying to wrap your head around this idea of emptiness is first we have to identify the thing that we're denying, the thing that we're believing, the thing that we're believing is there that's not there. So this is called, why is this not working? Where the heck is going on? Wow. Hmm. Yes, okay. So do you remember the gotcha? Remember that word?
Mhm.
And it sounds like what it means, like gotcha. It's like a gotcha. So that's kind of the was kind of implying is it's something that the thing that you thought that was there that was never there, never could be there, never would be there, never will be there. Come on, come back. There we go. Presenter. Okay.
There it is.
All right. So yeah, in the Bodhisattva, the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life states, until you find what's you thought was there, you can never grasp the how it cannot exist. That makes sense, right?
Mhm.
Because all Buddhist philosophy is trying to get you to this understanding that what you're doing is wrong. And if you never realize that that you're doing something wrong, it's the pen that you thought that we believe is out here on its own by itself. And first, you need to understand that the way that you think this thing exists in order to determine that it doesn't exist the way. So first, we say, okay, the pen that's out here by itself, self-existingly, in the room, we leave it. There's still a pen there on its own by itself, right? And that's the thing we have to like. In any emptiness kind of analyzation, you have to first conclude, or first just see how you think it exists, and then you do the analyzation. Then you can determine that the thing you thought that was there was not there. That's what we're trying to prove. So this is the long definition: is any object of the mind that can exist on its own side through its unique way of being, without its existence having to be established by the fact of it appearing to a state of mind that's unimpaired. So a pen that could be here basically on its own, hardwired self-existently, without it having to, without it having to be established, appearing to a mind. And then they say that's not impaired, so you're not like having a hallucination of some sort. So then we go into like how things, sorry, Sandy, oh, I can't see this. There we go. Trying to get all this stuff on the screen, and I just made it worse. So Madhyamika Tantrika school. So how things exist. So their big thing is, and in Buddhism, there's stages in understanding emptiness in schools that work their way up to the highest, being Madhyamika Prasangika. This is a lower school, and they say object does not exist until the mind meets, or until the object does not exist until it meets the mind. So the only way that we know things exist is through perceiving them with the mind, right? Like you can't prove to me the existence of the silly putty without perceiving it, whether it's touching it, smelling it, seeing it with your eyeballs, tasting it. It all has to come through one of the doorways of your senses in order for it to exist for you. So then this comes to the 50-50. So out here, there's an object appearing to the mind, and then the mind is perceiving the object. And then when those two 50-50 come together, then you have the existent thing, the object becoming a real functional thing. If you're missing 50%, if it's not appearing to the mind, then you can't say you have a perception. You can't establish this thing as an existing thing if the mind is not perceiving it. So the 50-50 thing makes sense, right? 50%, there's an object, and then until that object appears to a mind, you can't establish its existence. The problem in all of this is that we think that the things exist separate from the mind. Like that's the gotcha, is the silly putty that's here. We leave this on the ground and we leave, and there's still silly putty sitting here, or the silly putty that's in my hand right now, separate that's just here because I decided to bring it, and not because your mind is meeting these shapes, and for you, your mind is creating this thing called silly putty for you. We think has some sort of self-existence that is independent of my mind perceiving it. Bless you. So there's data out here, and there's perceiver. Those two come together, then we have existing thing. Everybody okay with that, right?
Yep.
And not until. And just the big thing is realizing that we don't typically see things that way, you know. We think that the things are out there on their own, self-existently that way, and it has nothing to do with my mind. You know, that I'm just coming into encountering this thing. Completely 100% has nothing to do with my mind. And there's silly putty here, there's pens here, there's projector here, there's, you know, irritating people here. And that's how we're typically seeing it. It's just that things are out there coming at us. But this is, you know, 50% is our mind, 50% coming from this thing. And they say otherwise you could just make up, if it wasn't 50% coming from the object, then you would just be able to put silly putty on anything, right? If it was just an idea in my mind, like the 50% of my mind that is labeling this silly putty, if 50% wasn't appearing to you as that object in some way, then you just be able to say this is silly putty or silly putty this, right? If it was just coming from my mind simply. And there was nothing to do with any object out here. So that's just a subtle point. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. So we did the magic show example. You remember that? The stick? Okay. So and just in brief, that the magician says some words and changes a stick into a horse. And the people gather around, they see a stick, right? The magician, they see a stick and they see a horse and they take it to be a horse. They take it that to be the existence of the thing. They're all just taken back. The magician sees a horse but knows it's a stick, right? Because he's doing the magic spell. He knows the true nature, that is, it's just an illusion. And then there's somebody that walks up afterwards and just sees a stick there. So sees the actual true nature of that thing. So this is just a metaphor for 3 different types of people. Somebody that hasn't had the direct perception of emptiness. So sees a horse and believes that there's a horse out there. Doesn't know that the true nature is a stick, right? That's like us. Like we see the silly putty and we take it to be silly putty out here coming at us. We don't see the true nature of it. And then the next being is an Arya. So the Arya sees silly putty but knows that it's a stick, right? It sees silly putty but knows the true nature, that it's just a seed arising in their mind, throwing out there onto these shapes and colors, right? So they're aware of that, how they're being duped all the time. They're aware of the gotcha. They're aware of how they're misperceiving reality. The people that are watching the magic show, us, metaphorically speaking, we're not aware, so we're constantly perceiving things as coming at us. The Arya sees things as coming at them, but they know it's wrong, right? Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the last one is an Arya in the direct perception of emptiness, or you could say a Buddha. And so they see the true nature of this thing, that it's just an arising in the mind. This thing is completely dependent on arising, and they don't take it to be coming from out here at all. They understand that a seed is arising in mind, and you're throwing it out there. So we see it as out here coming at us. We are mistaking. We don't even think twice about it, and we just assume that it's coming at us and not from us. Arya sees it coming from the pen, but understands that it's wrong. And then an Arya in the direct perception of emptiness, or a Buddha, sees it as just an arising in the mind, a seed in the mind. You got that?
Mm-hmm.
Make sense? Yeah. Okay. So you can see how much, if it's true, and that if the reason that you're perceiving things in certain ways is because of your past karma, then obviously the more you understand that things are not coming at you and they're coming from you, the faster the progress you'll make, right? Like, because we mistaken this thing for coming at us, then we think the way to get pens is to go out and find pens, or to steal pens off other people, or to take one from work because I need one, right? Like, or to go to the store and buy some pens. Like we mistaking that the way to get pens is to somehow get it out there because it's out there, and not to plant the seed in my mind to create pens. And pens is just a small example. You know, it's kind of silly to talk about getting pens because I don't think we struggle from that karma very much. But I guess back in the day when it was really important to have pens, you know, like maybe Ben Franklin's days, you know, they're writing with, you know, like to have a really good pen was probably a little bit more of a problem, you know, than we have. And, you know, to have understand the knowledge of how to really create pens would be important, I would say, more so than what we're talking about. But this is just a microcosm, a small example for everything. But if you understand that, you know, that the pen, your perception of pen is dependent upon the seed in the mind that you put there by giving pens to other people in the past, then the way to get pen would just to go out and help somebody else get it first. You know, if it's a pen or whatever it is, money, whatever, you would make much quicker progress than, you know, they say like in that circle, that wheel of life painting, the first link is the blind man, right? It's the ignorance, not understanding that things are coming from us and not at us. And you know, you can't see, you're just going to stumble around in the dark your whole life if you're just thinking that the way to get things is to go out there and acquire them or hold on to them. If you understand that you have to create the karma for it to be created for you, then that's a whole different ball game, and things become much simpler, and stress is removed from your life, really. You know, because if things, there's no longer a struggle, you know. If things are really coming from causes and things don't exist the way we think they did, then everything we stress about on a daily basis is all for naught, you know. It's a waste of energy. Because if you understand karma, you just create the causes and you sit back and relax. You know, there'd be no need to stress ever again, really, you know. Because we stress because we're not sure of the outcome of what's going to happen. We're not sure if we're going to have the money to pay the bills, or we're not sure if we're going to be able to do this or that, or if I'll be healthy next month, or, right? But if things are causally working, then the more I can try to fine-tune my understanding of that, then it really will start to remove the stress out of your life, because you'll just do the thing that you got to do to create the cause. It's like a scientist in a lab that wants to create water and has no clue that hydrogen and oxygen, putting them together, will create water, you know? And they're just sitting there like, how do I do this, you know, and worrying, you know, maybe one day a leak comes in the roof and then they have water and they're like, oh, okay, finally I got water. But they have no idea how it got there, how to make it again. But a scientist that understands that process, you know, it's okay, it's easy. Just take this, bam, you got water. And there's no, why are you stressing? You just gotta, you know.
Maybe this isn't the same, but I have this one neighbor that can do anything. He can fix anything and
Yeah.
work on a farm. So I say to him, how long do you think that will take? He said, I always ask that. He said, oh, we'll do it. I said, do you think it'll take an hour, a day, a week? It'll take what it takes and it'll be done right.
Yeah.
And some things take a lot longer than they think that it may, but he never ever, he's just, I mean, he should be a brain surgeon, because when you're in surgery, that they do what needs to be done.
Yeah,
They're
right.
in the
Yeah.
brain, there's not like,
Yeah.
you know, you're not looking at
that's
directions. You have to think on your feet and you have to say, okay. And sometimes it takes, it was a simple fix, and other times.
Yeah. Yeah, though it's just becoming proficient at, you know, as spiritual practitioners now, your practice is learning how to become proficient at the practice, you know. And the way that you do that is by meditating on these ideas and realizing that every perception you have on a daily basis is completely wrong. You know?
There's that sort of concept of 24-hour time.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, the thing, you know what I mean, that you said that stress doesn't have to happen.
Right.
But sometimes we're within the confines of a external schedule, which.
Yeah, but people, you know, the debate for that would be, you know, people that have really tough schedules. Some people are not stressed at all with really strong and hard schedules, and some people are a complete mess and they can't handle it at all. So, you know, it's nothing about the schedule that's stressful or unstressful, you know.
I'm not making sense. It's more like, I'm thinking like traffic jams and things that you can't control, things without, you know, you have to do something to be somewhere. I can see why some people get stressed and some people don't. But
Well, yeah,
it's-
right. So your
sometimes-
reaction to
Yes.
things is optional, right?
Right,
But in the present moment, it's like if you're perceiving somebody as irritating in the present moment, then you're irritated. That means you're irritated, right? So it's too late at that point to
Right.
change it. So all you can do is understand that this is coming from causes, and I must have created a cause to have this happen in my life. And the only way that you can get behind that is to like dig into like these emptiness proofs. Like you got to prove to yourself that the way that you're perceiving the irritating person is wrong, you know? So when you're irritated by somebody, it's too late. Those seeds are ripening, it's too late. The only thing you do is make sure that you don't recreate those causes. And eventually, you stop putting those ammunition in the gun, so to speak, and it won't fire anymore, but you still have that plenty of ammunition there to go get rid of, because of how you've been behaving, in the blind sense, not understanding that, not understanding how to create things. So to try to be, let's say, if you're stuck in a traffic jam, that's presenting you with a lack of time, right? Like if I was planning on doing something and now I don't have the time to do that thing because a traffic jam arose into my life, at that time it's too late. You're stuck in traffic jam. You can't change the present in the present. So trying to get upset about it, trying to change it is futile. It won't help. But you can understand that why is this situation just arise in my life, and what could be the cause for me all of a sudden not having the time that I need? That would be stealing. Stealing is the cause of not having things that you need for yourself. Stealing other people's time. With maybe somebody in the past 2 weeks or something, in the past week, you were with somebody and you just talked their ear off and they had plenty of things that they'd rather be doing, but instead they have to stand there and listen to you to be polite, But in your mind, you have some recognition that, you just wanted them to listen to you, and you know what I mean? So you were kind of stealing their time in a sense. I mean, there's millions of ways to do this one, and then that would create the seeds for you to have things arise in your world that would prevent you from having the time that you need to do.
Louise Hay died last night at 90. I don't know who she is, but
Yeah, solid.
yeah, so she's 90, and she has all these things that say things like when people, they're called Hayisms, because that was her last name.
Mm.
So it says, like, if you have a sore throat, it's because maybe you spoke badly, ill, you spoke ill of someone, not recently, but
Yeah.
maybe in the past 2 weeks.
Yeah.
If you're irritated, maybe you didn't listen to someone,
Yeah,
and
that's
just to
cool.
listen. And so, but she gives things that you can do to remedy it.
Yeah.
She had like little, and they sound so silly, but in the relevance, when I heard she kind of, oh, their calendars, and well, who's gonna, what's the daily thing gonna be today? Because it's a new month
Yeah.
starting tomorrow, and she always gives things for,
Yeah.
and I don't know, it's just
Yeah, that's
something that you
cool.
said reminded me of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Past,
like
present,
it causes,
future.
yeah.
And she talks about past, present, and future.
Maybe saying harsh things
Yeah.
to other people will create a voice that is sore today and hurts, in the
So
future.
the remedy is to go around and say,
Yeah.
hey, you look really nice. And
Yeah.
And then the more you praise them, your voice gets better.
Yeah.
She has,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
It sounds really wise. Yeah. That's cool. So yeah, that's the magician show. So basically it's, those people in that scenario, the more you understand how the stick, or how the horse really exists, the more, metaphorically speaking, the more you'll be efficient and proficient in life, in creating the things you want to create and stop suffering. Ultimately is to end suffering. So then we have the 5 proofs according to the Madhyamika Prasangika school, which is the highest school of Buddhism. Big words, Madhyamika Prasangika. And I believe it translates to, yeah, I don't know, I forget how it translates to, but it basically is middle way ideas. So the first thing that we went to, which is pretty much the biggest one and a really important one, is the emptiness of one and many. So you remember this at all?
Mm-hmm.
This is the one you got to hear like a zillion times, so we'll do it again. So the statement is, consider a pen. It does not really exist, for it is neither one thing which really exists, nor many things that really exist.
was trying to explain this to my husband.
Yeah. So,
I don't know if you got it.
so really meaning that really self-existent, just replace really like, does this pen really exist? Really?
It really exists,
Well,
but exists as not just a pen, because that comes from your mind, but it exists. It's real. It's there.
well, so you would have, so the proper way to say it would be, it really exists dependent on someone's perception of it. You know, there's always got to be that part of the mind perceiving it. Something that really exists on its own is a gotcha. That's that gotcha, the thing that can't, see, it's the thing that we think is there. It's the thing that exists on its own out here, you know, because this apparatus that we have is faulty. You know, you looking at things in the world, this ignorance is innate in us, it's born in us, and we're just have the facilities to see things as being separate from us. And, you know, we take it to be that way, and that's the problem. We take things to becoming. So it exists, but dependent upon a mind perceiving it. You know, so you got to say exists to who? You know? Because to a dog, this doesn't exist as a pen. Can't say a pen really exists to a dog.
But it exists.
You would have to say a cylinder, like a
Right.
cylinder exists, yeah.
Mhm.
But like a pen doesn't exist to a
Right.
dog. Or a pen doesn't exist to a Eskimo, you know, 500 years ago.
I thought it wasn't so much that it didn't exist, but that nothing at all had any self-existence.
Right, so
Right.
it exists in dependence upon the
Right.
mind perceiving it.
Right.
Take away the mind, the
Right.
50-50,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, a pen does not exist to a dog, right? Right, because
Right.
a dog
Right.
doesn't see this as a pen,
Right.
sees a chew toy, we see it as a pen. But the thing is like when we put this on the ground and we both leave, at that time you know, which is it? So you have to get the sense that it's neither. It's empty, it's blank, it's you know, and if a dog comes back in, there's a chew toy. If a human comes back in, it's a pen. If both come back in, then there's two realities happening. And right now there's four realities happening right now. You know, we all seem to be thinking we're seeing the same thing, right? But we all have, you know, yeah, maybe we're all seeing, like we can all agree that this is a pen, but how you're perceiving this is probably slightly different than how I'm perceiving.
Well, that's like with my husband. He'll say a color is brown, and I'll say it's gray.
Yeah,
So
colorblind
it's,
people.
You know,
Yeah, color.
and neither one of us are colorblind, but we just,
Right.
as our mind
Right.
perceives
Yeah.
the color differently.
Yeah,
So
they're
is it gray or brown? It's neither,
or both,
or both.
depending on who's perceiving, right? So the thing is that we think there's color out there on its own, right?
Mhm.
And that there's self-existing green,
Mhm.
and that everybody perceives green the same way. You know, these things are a little bit easier to wrap your head around, you know, where there's like a great song, you know, the best song on the radio, you know, not everybody perceives those things the same way. So it can't be, the quality has to be coming from the mind perceiving it. So let's do the mind, let's try to get through this one, the one or many. So does this pen exist as one thing or as many things? So let's try one. So let's see, is this one thing? So basically, in this thing, consider it does not really exist, for it is neither one thing which really exists nor as many things that really exist. So if we can prove that it doesn't exist as one thing, and if we can prove that it doesn't exist as many things on its own, then what do we prove? That it can't exist as the way we think it does, right? Without analysis, we think it exists, you know, really exists. So we're going to analyze, okay, that way that we think it really exists, is it possible? And the way that we check to see if it's possible, is it one or many? So you develop a complete set of possibilities. One thing, many things. Is there any other options other than one thing or many in that set, that kind of idea? Either something is singular or something is plural, right? There's no middle, there's no other option there. Otherwise it's nothing, you know? So but we're saying that there's something here. So if there's something, there had to be one thing or many. So one thing. So if it was one, then one thing would mean it can't have any parts, right? Like we say there's one pen. Yeah, there's one pen here, right? But if it was truly one pen, then it couldn't have parts. And does this thing have parts? Then we have to say, yeah, it has parts, right? Here's the cap, there's a tip, there's the writing on the side, there's that taper part. So, okay, then we say, okay, well, then it's many things. Is it many things? You know? Sorry, I'm just
Yeah,
having a brain fart.
but I mean, you keep saying the same things, if the object
Yeah.
doesn't exist until
Yeah.
it's your mind.
So
So the
if
mind
okay,
is one
yeah.
thing.
Oh, so here's the thing. Yeah, is the many. We say it's many, but there's not many pens here. Is the
Right.
idea? Like we're saying there's one pen, but you know, there can't be one thing here because it's many parts. And if it's many, then it can't be one. So there's a problem. You know, there's a logical problem. Something that's one can't have parts, and something that's many can't be one, right? Logically stating. So if we say that it can't be one, then we rule that one out. It's not one pen out here coming at you because it has all these parts. And if we say that if it really existed, it would have to be many, then there's a problem there too because it's just one pen. You know, we don't see this as many pens. We say one pen. So then you would have to say, my mind is gluing the many parts together, and the concept is arising in my mind and gluing these parts together and labeling them pen, right? But the oneness of the pen is not in this thing, you know? If it was in the thing, then it couldn't have parts. So the oneness has to be coming from the mind, perceiving, gluing the parts together and labeling it the way it does. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So without the label,
Doesn't exist.
you can't say that there's pen here,
Right.
right? Because there could be a cylinder. There's a cylinder here, but the mind has to take those parts and put them together and glue them together. And then based on your conditioning, based on the karma and the seeds in the mind, a seed arises and then it's kind of like glues them together and then says pen. So pen is just an idea in the mind, right? It doesn't look like that, you know? It looks like it's out here on its own coming at you. But what the problem is that we mistaken the pen in the mind for the pen out here, for the object out here. Does that make sense? The picture. We have a picture of pen in the mind that we overlay onto this thing. And the problem is that we mistaken that image for the actual thing itself. And that's what creates all of our suffering. So, and then what you're actually doing is a complete impossibility, right? So here's, and this is the cool thing. So on the, remember the paths, the 5 paths? So the second path, the path of preparation, which is before the direct perception of emptiness, which is path 3. So right before you have a direct perception of emptiness, on the path of preparation, you will perceive this directly. This will be like a life-changing, it's hard to even limit it to this life, you know, but like a whole universe-changing perception you'll have. You will see that out here, there's only been some indicators, some colors and shapes out here, right? There's some black tip out here, there's some silver tip, you know, some writing out here. And that's all that was out here coming at you. And there's never been pen. There's never been pen out here. Pen was just an idea, and you catch your mind, you catch the seed arising in your mind and projecting out here onto this thing. But you realize that there's never been pen. It's just been some indicators, some colors and shapes that have been, your eye has been putting together, and then in your mind you catch that mental image arising. And then they call it, that's called a perception of dependent origination. That's the long word for it. So dependent origination. This is dependently, the pen is dependently originating from a seed in the mind. So you catch that imprint. So right now it's happening so fast that it's like it's ripening. You throw it out here, and you take it to be already out here coming at you, right? But because you've been, you know, being kind to other people, and kindness is the main cause that creates this experience. You've been meditating, you've been kind to other people. You catch like slow motion, you would catch that seed opening and then throwing it out here. And then you see that process happening. And then you realize that there's never been pen out there coming at you. That's been coming from you. And there's always just been some indicators out here, which is, you know, cool. So here's another
But the
little
whole thing is the Madhyamika.
Madhyamika Prasangika.
That's
Yeah.
what this whole,
Yeah, this is one of the 5 proofs of emptiness, and this is a pretty big one. So we are saying that there is some shapes and colors out here, but the mind is gluing. The mind is projecting pen onto this thing, and until the mind projects the seed, until that seed arises and projects mind onto the pen onto this thing, there is no pen, right? And what you think you're doing is impossible, right? We think we're perceiving pen, but in order to receive a whole pen, you have to what? Look at the parts of the pen, right? Oh, I brought this fancy thing because no one's going to know what it is, probably. All right. So what is this? Does anybody not? If anybody knows, don't say it. But if you don't know, do you know what this is? Do you know? Do you know? No, you don't know? Okay. So what is this thing?
no,
Right. So right now you just have you have random seeds going off in the mind. You're trying to glue like some idea that you have some. Okay, there's some clear thing there. There's a handle thing here, maybe, or maybe the handle thing's here, or maybe you know, I don't know, but you know, and your mind's going through the library in here and trying to create a concept for this thing. But really, this is kind of a useless thing for you right now. Like,
right.
what would you do with this? Anybody have an idea?
It's like maybe you could suction things up, or
Maybe.
maybe it's like a gun that would put the balls in it and you'll shoot them out.
Okay, maybe. Any other ideas?
Maybe some kind of kitchen utensil.
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah. So we can come up with different uses for it.
The one from the Lego place.
Okay. So what it is right now is just some colors and shapes right now that are presenting to your mind. Right, there's like some clear thing here, there's a yellow thing here, a little handle-ish thing, taper thing. We can kind of say, if I said like, okay, what's this thing? We can kind of conclude that maybe that's a handle, right? That's one part of the whole thing. So we know there's a handle. We know there's a clear thing that, oh, go back together. Clear thing, so why would there be a clear thing? Probably did want to see something in there or to put something in there. So, you know, there's some sort of chamber, there's a handle. So the mind is like trying to glue this right together. So out here, there's just some color and shapes, indicators, and your mind is putting all these concepts. So then the function of this thing, and you know, what it's for is to suck up bugs. You know, it's a bug buster. So you take this cap off, and if a bug is around you, and you put it in there, and then you take it outside.
You were close.
Yeah, you were close. And then you know, like for catching flies or you know, it's awesome. And you don't have to kill the bugs. You let them outside. You don't have to touch them. Yeah. So, but the idea now, you have a concept of what this thing could be used for. But until I gave that to you, you might be able to figure it out. If I remove the switch, you'd probably be like, "What the hell is this thing?" You know. But if I gave it to you, you'd be like, "Okay, there's something there that's indicating me there's a switch. So let me try turn it on." And you're like, "All right, it sounds like a vacuum or something." But if this thing had a nature of being a bug suction thing on its own, then you guys would have known what it was as soon as I brought it out, right? Because it would have been coming from the thing.
That's right.
But because it's not that way, we had really just ideas of what it could possibly be used for. So I wanted to bring this out too, because it's a little bit bigger. So, and then what you think you're doing, so we think, right now we're thinking we're seeing a bug buster. It's called the bug buster, a bug vacuum out here. But in order to perceive a whole bug buster, we have to look at the parts of the bug buster, right? So there's a tube here, there's the handle here, there's a switch here. You know, we can assume there's like a little vacuum thing. There's probably a battery under here, right? But the eyeball has to go and look at the parts. Has to look at the handle, the switch, this part, right? And while you're looking at the parts of the bug buster, you can't see the whole bug buster, right? You can't perceive the whole thing while you're looking at the parts of the thing, right? And you can't perceive the whole thing without looking at the parts of the thing. So it's impossible what you think. You can never see the whole bug buster. You know, because you always have to look at the parts to perceive the whole thing. And while you're looking at the parts, you can't see the whole thing. There's a problem there. So you never are ever looking at anything in a whole sense, you know? You're just looking at indicators. And what you are doing is looking at a perfect little image of a bug vacuum in your mind. And then you mistaken that 3D perfect image to be this thing out here. And another proof that what you're doing is impossible is that, you believe that this has a back right now, right? A back to it.
Right.
Like, you believe that this is like a functional thing, a 3D thing, and it has a back. But you don't know what's on the back here. You just assume there's more yellow going around, right? But it could be like a turtle back here, or it could be like, I don't know, like a piece of food or something, or like this thing could be totally non-functional in a sense. But we think that we see the whole thing, but you're never ever seeing the whole thing. I could turn it over and then you still don't know what's on the back here. You never see the whole object, right? You're always just kind of looking in almost like 2 dimensions,
Mm-hmm.
But we feel like we're seeing a whole thing because we're watching that image in the mind of the bug vacuum, and that's a perfect thing. And that image is what we mistaken for the things, because we project that image out here and then we think it's out here on its own. But with under analysis, we can discover that it's not the case. So
It's a great thing to bring.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not as many things that people don't know what are anymore. But every time I have this at home, someone comes over like, "What is that?" Right? But if the thing was a bug vacuum in and of itself, that everybody that's seen this thing would know exactly what it was the first moment they seen it, and it's not the case. And so, I love this idea is that, what you think you're doing is impossible. We think we're perceiving a whole vacuum here, but in order to see the whole vacuum, you got to look at the parts. I got to look at the cap. I got to look at the clear thing. I got to look at this. So your eyeballs are just scanning things constantly. It's harder to do. It's easier to do when you're closer up to something. Like, let's say I hold it here. And let's say I close my eyes, I put this in front of your face and you didn't know what it was. You would have to go like this, right? Like you would have to look at all the parts of it. And in your mind, you're creating a little perfect little schematic or a map of this thing, right? But you're never actually looking at the whole thing. Like even now, like I feel like I see I know there's a bug vacuum here, but I don't know if this part's still here when I'm looking at this part, right? And then I don't know if this part's still here if I'm looking at this part, right? But I feel like it's all there because we're creating that the mental image. The mental image is the thing that we're looking at. We're throwing out here onto this thing. So, and then, of course, the whole thing is that, where does the mental image come from? Why does my mind put these parts together and a label arise that arises for me? And that's karma, So if I now have some object, and maybe you never knew that, did you guys know something like this existed? You did?
You told us,
Okay.
but no, we didn't know that.
Before? Like, did you know there was an option to be able to remove bugs out of your house without killing them?
No.
Okay. Yeah, neither did I till I discovered this thing, right? So you can
Where'd
say
you
that the what?
Where'd you get it?
I forget, Amazon, I think. So you can say that the karma that created this idea of something that can remove bugs from your house without killing them came from protecting life in the past. Because you helped protect life in the past, that now you have something that's going to help protect your life. Because if you go and kill some insects and things that are problematic for you, that's going to create karma for you to have harm come to your body. So now you have a way to not have to touch something that you don't want to get, all over your hands you're scared of and harmless, and you can take them out. So you could say that kindness, helping other beings, taking care of other people's bodies, etc., created a seed in your mind to perceive something that could help you live a life that's less harmful.
I need one. That's all I know is I need one. Now that I know.
My grandson would love that. too.
Yes.
So let me just do this next one, and then we can kind of say this would be it. These ones are a little bit harder, and actually, the Geshe Michael class, he didn't even go into it because it was a lot, but Lama Root did somewhat. So this is this is called the sliver of diamond reasoning. This is like number 2. So consider all inner and outer things that perform a function. And things that perform a function, changing things or working things. That's just a thing that performs a function. So they do not arise ultimately. They don't arise out there on their own. For they do not arise from themselves. They do not arise arise ultimately from something other than themselves, and they do not arise from both. Oh, sorry, that shouldn't be and. But they do not arise from both, and they do not arise without a cause. So making that a little bit easier to understand. So consider a flower. A flower isn't caused out there, because if it were, it would have to be caused in one of 4 ways. So it would a flower would have to come from itself, something other than itself, both itself and something other than itself, or without a cause, randomly. So we'll kind of go through that really quickly. So consider a flower. Let's just draw a flower. Terrible flower, but let's see. Okay, consider a flower. There's our flower. So if a flower was caused out there on its own, it would have to come from one of those, because of one of those 4 ways. So can a flower come from a flower? Does a flower come from a flower? We have to say no, right? You don't. When you have one flower, you don't get another flower, right? A flower comes from a seed, right? We say, not a flower. You could say the seed comes from a flower, but the flower. But just having a flower isn't enough to cause another flower. So it can't come from itself. Flower doesn't come from flower. So from both. So we'll address the from both, itself or something other than flower. So you can basically say, if not from a flower, then it can't come from both. And these are really hard, and these are hard for me. So I'm just going to go through them, and if they seem hard, it's because they are. But to rule this one out, because we're trying to, it would have to be one of these 4 ways if it really existed. So we're going to rule out this one. You don't get a flower from a flower. And if you don't get a flower from a flower, then it can't come from both a flower and something other than itself, right? Does that make sense? So a flower from a flower is from itself. So then, and the 2 things are from itself or something other than itself. And then the third option here is, it would have, does it come from both?
Right.
So if it doesn't come from this one, then you can rule out this one, right? It doesn't come from both itself and something other than itself, because it doesn't come from itself. We just said that. That make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, a little bit?
Keep going.
Okay. All right, and then, so do not arise without a cause. So this is the 4th one. We're coming back to the second one, something other than itself, because this is what we do believe, it comes from something other than itself. So we're going to rule out these 3 first. So without a cause, so randomly. So you can't have a flower without sunlight, earth, etc. You just don't get random flowers. There's causes. Things don't. We don't believe that you can get a flower just randomly, right? So that one's kind of a silly one. These last 2. Well, then that rules out. Well, okay. This one is more just to cover all your bases. Something without a cause randomly. So this is let's see. So this is coming to this idea. So what we do believe is that it came from what? Like a flower comes from what? A seed, right? We say it comes from a seed, right? So we're going to analyze this one. So we ruled out these other 3, and we're 1 away from proving that a flower can't be caused out there. It can't be happening the way it seems to be happening, right? So this is we believe that a seed creates a flower, right? So we have a seed, and then eventually we have a flower. The problem is where does this seed become the flower? Can you identify any moment of time where the seed stops becoming a seed and becomes a flower?
It's a process.
Yeah, it's a process, but you can never find a moment when it says, okay, now I'm a flower and I'm no longer a seed, or I'm a seed and I'm now becoming a flower. There's no moment in time. Like, this is like broken down, and this is how we think it happens, right? We have a snapshot here. Okay, there's a little tail happening. Snapshot here. Okay, there's a little bit of a, like a seedling starting, right? Imagine this was all the way up to this. It looks like it's a pea seed, a pea sprout or something, or a bean sprout. But this is kind of like we're just taking mental snapshots. But like, just imagine in between these 2, you have a seed and then you have the starts of a flower. You can never ever identify a moment where that thing is becoming the flower. Never. You can always find a further divisible moment of time. Like, let's say, the seed became a flower at 8:30 today. Well, was it 8:30 and 1 second? Okay, well, if it was 8:30 and 1 second, yeah, that's when it became a flower. Okay, well, was it 8:30 and 0.05 of a second? And you go down infinitesimally until you can never find a moment in time where this seed actually became the seed actually became the flower. Well, we say, yeah, of course, the flower came from the seed, right? But if it happened out there, you would have to be able to identify a time when the thing stopped being a seed and became a flower, and you can't. It's just constantly. It's a moment to moment. You can never find a moment in time. Is the problem. So it can't be happening out there the way it seems to be happening out there. We are projecting these causes. We are projecting these instances onto this object. We see a seed, and then we see a flower, and then we glue together that cause and the effect, and we say, yeah, that seed came, or the flower came from that seed. And it does, in a sense of the same way that the pen exists. It functions, but it's not out here coming at us. It's coming from us. Same thing here. If it was happening out here, if it was coming from something other than the flower, which is the seed, then you would have to be able to identify a moment in time when one became the next. You can never find the moment. When does the seed start? When does it decide to start becoming, is it the first moment some water touches it? Can you find that exact moment? Or can that moment be divided infinitely, into smaller moments of time? Imagine like that big board in Central Park, or Times Square or something, where they have all the hundreds of thousands of millions of points on the end of time, Like, you can never identify a clear moment in time. And then here's the other thing. And if a seed which exists independently out there, if the seed existed as a seed, here's the last thing we'll do. If a seed existed as a seed, then how would it ever be able to change to become something other than a seed? Because that's what it was. It would be a seed. It would never be able to change to be a flower because the seed is a seed, right?
Right.
A seed's a seed.
Right.
If it existed the way we feel like it does and the way we seem like it does, then it would never change because, once it becomes a flower, it's no longer a seed. The seed's destroyed. So, if a seed's a seed, it would never be able to start to transform to become something else and would never be able to change. If it was truly a seed, because that's what it would be, self-existently out there on its own. So the whole thing is to get you to a flower isn't caused out there. So even the cause and effect, the way that it seems to be happening, is not happening out here on its own either. The mind glues together the cause. So here's another way to think of it. The cause for the flower is the seed, right? But only when the flower exists. So the cause for the flower is the seed, but only once the flower exists.
Right.
You can't say that. You can only do it retroactively, right? So it's not. There's no inherent nature in that seed to become the flower, And so the mind is gluing that retroactively and saying the seed was the cause for the flower.
Right.
And it's coming from the mind. The mind is creating that relationship of cause and effect. This is really hard, like mind melting stuff. So sorry. So that's pretty much it. But they're just things that start to make you. Lumber says things that make you go, Like it just starts to make you wonder. Like, okay, okay, if a seed was a seed, then how would it ever become a flower? Because it's a seed. That's what it was, a seed. If it existed the way we think it did, and if it was changing into become a flower, at what time does it become a flower? Can you find a moment in time? These are just snapshots, but you can put infinitely smaller images in between these two stages, right? You can go for endless time, find moments, like it would look like nothing's changing, but you could one moment later, and you could stick a zillion more photos in between these two and say, okay, that into that.
It reminds me of that. Is the thing turned off? No. Class being turned off. They can't hear.
No, they could hear.
Turn off.
They all could hear.
No, they can hear.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
When infertility docs predict ovulation in women's cycles, And they can never, ever predict when a woman ovulates. They can't.
Hmm.
It's retroactive.
Hmm.
You can count 14 days back.
Yeah.
And say, that's when
Yeah.
you ovulated, and that's when you could have had, kids.
Yeah, that's right.
You can't count 14 days from the first of the month, because it's impossible.
Oh, right.
And
Yeah.
it just is in
Yeah.
terms of life and its effect. So it just. when
Yeah,
you're
because
doing
it's
that,
not,
it
because it's not
reminds you-
happening out there the way it
It's not
seems.
happening out there. It happened.
Well, no, I mean, it's the same as this. It's not happening the way that
It's not
seems to
happening
be.
the
If
way
it
it
was,
seems
then
to
you would be able to predict it
You'd be able
every
to
week,
predict.
every
But
month.
It's such a complex science.
Yeah.
People say, well, how can you
Yeah.
days?
Yeah.
But people spend their whole lives.
Trying to
Men and
analyze it.
women spend their whole lives studying those 28 days
Yeah.
and trying to fit. And you can do it retroactively,
Yeah.
but you can't do it proactively.
Yeah.
Making, anyway.
Yeah.
just so
No,
much
it's
to say
good.
in terms of